space. So, Stuart, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, the first thing we're going to do, thanks very much, Maureen, Brandon, and everyone that's put so much energy into making today possible. We're going to watch a little movie first, which was the one that we used for our crowdfunding. So let's see what happens. Okay. It's still a bit of a thrill for me to see that, even though it's 18 months or something or more ago that was released to the world. And I don't know if you noticed that towards the end I put my hand on Cedar's knee. We were just sort of squatting down beside the beehive, and we got floods and floods of emails and messages coming in, but one that stuck in my mind, I hope you'll forgive me, it was a bloke that wrote in. I don't know where he was from. He said, I think it's a really good invention. I'm sort of pleased that they did it, but why do I always have to watch gay men? The things that just stick in your mind, right? So, this will be the story of developing it and what happened, and hopefully we can weave principles and pivots around design and innovation in it. So let's see what happens now. So you got the idea from the video, but it was Cedar's my third son of 4 direct children and quite a few stepchildren I'm lucky enough to have. And we've always clicked in terms of that inventing and tinkering, and I feel like a very lucky dad just for that. I feel close to all my kids, but Cedar and I have that ability to almost know what each other's thinking, but sort of stimulate each other's thinking at the same time. And so, wonderful. I used to work in the community sector, so this whole area of not so much tinkering and inventing, but the area of business that I've just been rocket launched into is new for me. And Cedar was in small business as a training people with paramotoring, paragliding, and he had about 20 beehives. I had 1 or 2 hives on and off all my life, and my dad had bees, so I was sort of familiar with them. Yeah, and 10 years ago was when Cedar said, "Come on, let's get into this." And 6 years roughly into that was when we both realised, wow, we might even be able to do this, and we sort of eased up. We sort of made ourselves poor, time rich, but money very poor, yeah. But the first thing to just say, really, in this whole thing, there's been so many elements that have made this thing possible, and the principal one is all the people in Cedar and my lives. And I'd just like to say this is a big thank you to them. My life partner Michelle sitting down the front here, and there's also a couple of people not pictured, but they're in the audience here somewhere. Where's Maya and Angus? Somewhere over there, part of the Evolve Group factory that worked with us so closely. And if I can just say one thing about engineers and working with factories and so on, those two were a group of about 6 senior staff of the Evolve Group that Cedar and I, we dealt with a lot of different engineers by the time we got to Evolve in Brisbane, and it struck me straight away they were actually interested in us and what we'd done, and they weren't going to say, as got sort of not quite said to us, but indicated again and again in other places that we'd been to, well, okay, you've done this, good on you fellas, but leave it to the big boys now. They didn't do that at all, which was one big reason why I said, well, let's stick with these guys. They were interested in what we'd done, and they were curious about it, and they weren't going to impose their ideas, at least not at first. so they were great. So this is a big thank you. And, I'll just go back just one if I can. Far left is my dad. So he's going to turn 90 in November. He's been a very excited supporter of us, and particularly, as I said, we sort of were skidding along the bottom financially, so Dad really helped out with keeping me alive and paying for the early prototyping and so on. So I live in an extraordinary big family, and then the Northern Rivers of New South Wales community is an extraordinary community too, and which meant that when things did go crazy, we suddenly could call on 20 or 30 people quite quickly to help us. Okay, so Cedar is quite a industrious person. He'll work late into the night, but he's not physically enthusiastic, if you know what I mean. But he had these 20 beehives. There's a whole long story as to how come he ended up with 20. So he found himself in the Northern Rivers, humid summer, lifting the heavy boxes off beehives, getting stung. Even when you have bee suits on, you get sweaty. The bees will sting you through your bee suits. And then dragging these heavy boxes off to the shed to extract the honey. And he thought, there's just got to be a better way, which has become our little theme song of our efforts. There must be a better way than this. And so he was saying to me, calm down, we've got to figure out some way we can get honey out of a beehive without opening it, without all this hassle. But those of you that know beehives, imagine a filing cabinet with bees all around it and all in it, and there's the hanging files which have the honey in it. How are you going to get to that file without, and get it out without somehow disturbing the bees? It seemed like an impossible quest. But it was just so fun to be working with Cedar on it. I couldn't resist it, and he became fairly determined about it. And we did these early attempts. We had to order what's called fully drawn plastic comb from America, and Cedar carved it up. Those two pieces sort of fit together, and you sort of know what honeycomb is, a matrix of hexagonal cells. So that particular one was designed to pull the cells apart that way, with the idea the honey had dropped between them. We weren't quite sure what we'd do once the honey was dropping, but at least pull the cells apart was one of our ideas. We had hot wire ideas, we had all sorts of things we were trying out, and it was mainly Cedar that was making it. I was in the luxurious position of having the ideas and brainstorming and drawing things out, and Cedar would generally be the one that would go and make it. So there he is with a variation of what you just saw before, and there's an old inner tube at the back of that forming a diaphragm, and he's sucking on a tube to make the inner tube pull, and that'll pull the comb apart. And we hadn't, as I said, figured out the honey will fall out, but then what? We sort of had... Anyway, so just one example of the many things we went to. Well, I'm going to just stop there, because that went on for years and years, trying different ways of doing it. But Cedar said that I had several coffees that morning. I've had several this morning, and I'm jittery. But, and I just started drawing out another way of the cells splitting. Instead of splitting sort of horizontally like that, I started wondering whether could you shift them somehow vertically. And I couldn't. I can imagine things in 3D. I can imagine engines working in 3D and all their little bits, but I couldn't quite picture how could they split vertically. What would happen? And I drew it out, and Cedar saw what I was doing. And to his credit, I think, Ian talked about how competition is a driver, but an element of competition, one element of this, and this is where a paradox sort of comes in, is also being able to let go. Now, Cedar saw what I was doing, saw the potential in it, and let go of years and years of intricate carving work and all the ideas he'd had. He said, that's it. That's where we're going. He knew straight away, and was able to let go of the competition and say, Dad, we're on a journey. So there it is. There's hexagonal cells, and the idea was to split them, and all of a sudden the cells become channels instead of cells, and the honey will travel downwards. There's more to it than that, of course, but but that was the idea, and the idea that made us realise, wow, maybe we can do it. And pouring through patents and all of the things we've we were doing then and had to do since, there hasn't been, no one else had figured that out as far as we know, which is an extraordinary situation to be in, really. So that was one of the early prototypes where we did it. The honey flowed out. We had, you can see up the top there, it's just a socket wrench, sort of with the socket going into the hive, and it was all just jimmied together. But the honey came out. It was an extraordinary moment, that time when it actually flowed out. We turned that handle, we turned that socket wrench, and it seemed to just take ages. Nothing happened for what seemed like days, weeks. It was really probably 30 seconds, and then the honey came out. And then it happened. But that put us in the position of certainly for me, and I think for CEDA, of, okay, looks like we can do something here, but is it a good idea? Is this a good thing for the world? Is it a good thing for bees? Is it a good thing for beekeepers? That requires some sort of internal discipline to be thinking, look, I just can hardly stop this innovation process. We're so into it, the technical challenges of it all, it's so exciting. We want to be able to do it, but is it a good idea? Is it, on balance, going to be better for people, better for our world, better for our environment? It's made of plastic, it's more plastic in the world. What's it going to do with all of the beekeepers that have their set ways and the ones that even go down to the backyard and brave these fierce creatures and pull the hive apart to get the honey and come home to their kids and their partner saying, look what I got, and all of a sudden you can turn a tap. Is it a good idea? And we know the bees are in trouble, not in all places of the world, but in plenty. Is it going to help that? And so I think that's an important part of being an innovator and an inventor as well, is thinking about these things. I mean, in some way, it's not like you can have a definitive answer, but and we said, we decided it was. We were biased. But it wasn't so much because what we developed would increase the number of bees significantly enough to make a difference, but we thought the main reason was a good idea is that it would increase the number of beekeepers, the number of people engaged with these extraordinary creatures, the bees. And even some of the talks today sort of alluded to the fact that, when humans are in a group, they're deciding things democratically, maybe around the city design, as Ali was talking about, that bees are a group, and you can't really think of a beehive or an individual bee as an individual bee. It can't be a bee without its hive. There's just no such thing. And so when people start to get in touch with the world of bees, there's a lot to learn, and it's intriguing and fascinating and endlessly educative, really. So we thought that was a good idea, and that was enough for us. And so there's the finished product. CEDA thought it'd be a great idea to make the hive beautiful, which rather than just a sort of scrappy little box in the backyard, and I think he was right. And if you look carefully, you can, there's a pointer here. I think it's that. You can see there's a little tube there. That's one end of a honeycomb frame, the flow frame, and the honey's pouring out the tube into that jar, and we're just sort of stacking them up as they fill. So then we got it to the stage where we thought it works, and and we had to sort of figure out how we were going to raise the money to both make the quite expensive plastic injection moulds, as well as possibly start paying for patents and so on. And we decided on crowdfunding. Well, CEDA was very keen on crowdfunding. I knew very little about it at the time. Both of us a bit scared of dealing with big banks, not sure whether we could cope with the pressure of having, investors on our backs and so on. So we decided to do crowdfunding, and it became an extraordinary phenomenon in itself. So there's the one story is the invention, but the crowdfunding and what happened is a whole another thing. That's another reason we did crowdfunding was that it felt like, well, we can say to the world in one go, if they take any notice, we did this. We put our little flag in the sand or on the hill or wherever it is. And we thought maybe we'd get a bit of money. And I've always wondered how business works, because we could have just sort of tried to sell the idea to someone and get out of there. It might have been a good idea, but we thought, no, we'll give it a go. So that's that one of the, 12 million US dollars. That's why it became a story. When you do crowdfunding, you usually have to set a sort of target above which it's a go and below which you haven't made enough money to let the project happen. So, I mucked around with spreadsheets and got to the figure of about $70,000 would pay for a small mould and this and that. And so $70,000 would get us over the hump, so to speak, and the project could go ahead. Michelle was with me and we were launching it with TV cameras and things like that. We, at the time, sort of naively thought that local media were important. Anyway, Cedar had pressed the button on his smartphone, which started the crowdfunding thing, and then it was my turn to get interviewed and talk about father and son working together and all that stuff, which was lovely. But Cedar, a few minutes in, Cedar interrupted the interview I was having live to television stations. What are you doing? He said, we've hit it. We've hit the target. So then it was all just sort of crazy. $70,000 in a matter of minutes, and it just kept going. We had millions of views of our videos. Look, I said that in a sort of a no, didn't I? I mean, I don't know how to say something like that. Even when we had, for example, when the videos were beginning to go viral and there was 20,000 viewers, I thought, who are all these people? It still sort of boggles me. The idea was to get a few thousand email addresses, and wow. The crowdfunding target, we broke records in crowdfunding, which is, it's lovely that it's an Australian thing, and it's lovely that it's an agricultural, in essence, invention. I love that. It was the largest Indiegogo campaign ever, ranked top in, so there's all these statistics about how extraordinary it was. And we had 25,000 orders from 120 countries, which we thought, that should be pretty straightforward. Because you get your database, you give that to a fulfillment company, you get your people from your factory, they make it, and you sit back and it happens, doesn't it? Anyway, so this is where the sticky business, that little, that picture there, what's called a GIF because it's animated, keeps, that's looking down the tunnel at the bottom of a flow frame. So we've got a frame of honeycomb. It's got our clever little plastic that changes from cells to channels in it. And when you look down, so the verification process got bogged down. So I had my personal PayPal account. I'll just use that, link that to the crowdfunding site, and that should work. So emails on my computer for people pledging money just started coming in so thick and fast from the PayPal donations that I couldn't actually click on emails I wanted to see. They were just chunking down the page so quickly. This was in the first few days. And so we soon hit $600,000 in PayPal, and that was a fifth of what was coming in. Most was coming in through credit cards. And PayPal just slammed it shut. They said, there must be fraud here. There's something weird going on. They've got their automatic system. I said, what? What are you doing? You can't shut it. Well, PayPal didn't communicate with us very well. They just shut things when they... And so we connected Cedar's account to it, and it got to 250,000, and they shut that again. And then we got a friend. So by the end... it's just how it worked. So, yeah. that meant we had, several credit card accounts and 4 or 5 PayPal accounts to deal with all of this money sitting in. And then Indiegogo, we thought, well, clearly they're experienced. They've been running this crowdfunding for quite a while. They'll give us a comprehensive database that'll tell us everything we need to know, and we'll just plug it into some sort of system and off it'll all work. Well, that didn't work like that at all. Indiegogo, for one example, had made the mistake of allowing people to pledge money without actually saying what it was for. So we had thousands and thousands of people who'd given us money, and we didn't know what of the 5 or 6 different options we were offering, which ones they wanted. And you think, oh, well, you could tell by how much money they pledged. But people were so keen. People were so keen that they were donating extra. So the Hive might be 600, but then they'd add another 120 just for fun. So we had, a database that... and then they would send us the database, and then 2 weeks later, maybe 400 or 500 people will have changed their addresses in that time, if you think about it. And so, anyway. And a fulfillment company should be able to ship anywhere. Well, we found out that wasn't true. And Cedra and I thought, well, we'll make sure our product's really good quality. We're committed to good quality, so therefore there won't be any problems. So that's good. We won't need any customer service. We've got 35 people working for us now, and most of them, well, half of them are customer service. It's incredible. And, I'm just trying to describe how naive, particularly I was. Didn't know anything about that. I didn't know that the United States isn't when it comes to imports, and every state has different taxation laws, and there's this thing called nexus, which means if you do some things in some states, it means you owe tax in that state, but if you do the same things in other states, you don't. And it gets complicated anyway. Because 2 members of the Evolve group are here, I won't talk about the companies, but it's, of course, it... But in terms of the idea, will this make a difference? Was it a good idea? I'll just give you bits of ideas. Because the harvesting of honey was so much easier, thousands and thousands of people, in fact, I think 60-70% of the people that have bought the Flow Hive haven't kept bees before. And so that's wonderful. So of those, it's now 35,000 people, at least 25,000 are new to bees, and I'm so pleased about that. And the industry was worried there'll be all these beekeepers that won't know how to look after bees, and those bees will get sick and they'll spread disease, and that's a genuine sort of concern. But what we found is sort of the opposite. They're so enthusiastic. They want to know about it all. They do join the local bee club. They do consult local beekeepers. They do connect up, and so it's so I don't know what the word is. That's fulfilling, heartwarming. I've been to a lot of different bee events and bee conferences and so on now, and to have person after person, particularly women, come up and say, thank you so much. Now I can keep bees, just like my dad did. I knew I couldn't lift those heavy boxes. Now I can. I'm so grateful. That has meant so much to me. We are working with beekeeping clubs and so on and doing educational courses, and that's great. Tens of thousands of newbies. And part of the innovation of the flow frames is that they have clear ends. So often beekeepers have put a window in the side of a beehive. There's a beehive there, and you see the sort of surface of the honeycomb and the bees crawling over it. But our frames you see down through, but you see from the end view. So you see down between the honeycomb, and you actually the last end, the clear end, you can see the cells. So you can see the bees working down inside the cells. You can watch their tongues. You can watch them having a nap, and knock on it and they go, ooh. And so, kids get fascinated, and that's wonderful. And we have been working with some universities and researchers around the world. So that's been, a tremendous part of it. So, are we going good for time, roughly?
We're going to have a little bit of a Q&A after, but if you can start wrapping it up so we have time, that'd be good.
This is the wrapping up. So it took us about a year to fulfil the crowdfunding orders, and it says 100%, but there were some people that never replied to our emails, never paid shipping, never, but everyone that we could, we delivered, which is close to 100%. Yeah, 35 people employed locally, and the Brisbane and the US factories, of course, employed more, so that's lovely. And we have continued to have healthy online orders, and yeah, we're still we had all these people that were so willing and passionate to get on board, which was tremendous, but lots of them ended up being quite confused as to what their role was and what it wasn't, and it's taken us a while to structure the company, and we're still, probably a quarter of a way through that or something. But it is great to be able to send out a care for the environment message with everything we do, because, of course, if you're a beekeeper, I think you just have to be an environmentalist. Bees will forage for 50 or 60 square kilometres at least. They'll go up to 7 kilometres in a big radius. And so, I care about what my bees are accessing, and I care about global warming. I'm hearing the stories from beekeepers all around the world that the flowering is all out of sync, and that throws their bees right out, because whereas one sort of vegetation would flower and then the next one in sequence in the old days, now they're all flowering together, and the bees sort of don't quite multiply up for all of that flowering, and then all of a sudden it stops. And so, it's... anyway, you become... When you think about bees, you can't help but think environmentally. It was wonderful. Thank you, Maureen Brandon, again, to win the Good Design Award. That was incredible. Yeah, one extraordinary thing. Yeah, and we've been able to promote good beekeeping, so that... But a last little story. Because we're in this situation for months where the world wanted this product and we didn't have it ready, we had this sort of unique little period of leverage. So we were able to auction off, say, the first flow hive off the factory floor, or raffle it actually on the World Wide Web, to raise money, firstly for Vanuatu with the cyclone that happened then, and then later on for Nepal with the earthquake. So it was, nearly $100,000 each that we were able to raise. But it's lovely to get creative with these things, and somehow I thought we've got to have a bee choosing the winning raffle ticket. So I'm saying this to Sita, we've got to have a bee. Bees have got to choose And so then I thought, well, how are we going to do that? We'll spread all the tickets out, and we'll see which one a bee. But there was like 20,000 tickets, and that's a lot of printing, environment, and also how on earth it'd be a tennis court. So I said, how would you see which ticket a bee landed on? And so I had to think some more. And finally, we had a disc with 0 to 9 printed on it that could spin around, sat just outside the hive entrance where the bees are flying in and out. We'd spin the disc, and it'd stop, and after a while a bee would land on one number, and that would be our first digit, like a 6, and then we'd spin it again, and a bee would land on 2, so you get a 6, 2, and finally we got a 7 or 8 digit number, which was the winning raffle ticket, and so that was fun, and then the winning, this was an international raffle, but the winner was from Mount Tamborine, which is just up the road. Well, there's more to this story. She was just up the road from where we live, but it's also a place that Sita used to paraglide. And as soon as he said, I used to paraglide there, I thought, we've got a delivery option. So Sita dressed up as a bee, got up the top of Mount Tamborine, jumped off his paraglider, and flew it down to this woman who we had down in the paddock below, wondering why we had her in a paddock, to get her flow hive. So it's always good to play, I think. So that's Sita and me. Very, very grateful for the extraordinary circumstances we find ourselves in and the enormous support we've had. Yeah.
How long did it take for one bee to land on the number 8 times?
Yeah, much longer than I thought,
yeah.
actually. But, time stretches. We'd spin it, and the bees would just be flying in and out. And why would they bother landing on a bit of paper that was spinning around in front of their hive? They're out. They're amazing the way they leave that hive going for the nectar. Sometimes I've mistakenly put a brick or something in front of the hive and they'll just bang into it, Anyway, they're up and, then they go, oh, and then they're off, So they're incredibly enthusiastic.
And so are you.
So
let me just ask you that.
So it took a while.
Yeah, it took a while.
Like a minute or two each.
So clearly you've been on a bit of a roller coaster ride. And certainly it's been a 10-year journey, but the last year and a half, it's really been a thrill. Looking back right now, what are maybe one or two things you might do differently with the power of hindsight?
Apart
from PayPal.
Well, if I'd known what was going to happen, I would have found a really good general manager of a company and said, that's yours. I guess that's one thing I might have done. The financial stuff, that's been such a circus. It wasn't only PayPal, it was the credit card companies too, weren't straightforward to deal with. And I'm very grateful again to our staff, some of whom who hammered out decent agreements with them. It's a big question, how would I do it again? Maybe that's enough, because really I'm a lucky fella to have gone through the journey at all, and so to want to change it almost anyway.
Because it was all learning.
Yeah, it still is. Yeah.
I did have the chance to try some of the honey, and it is without question the best I've ever had. It's just amazing.
Just to give it a plug, the honey flows directly out of the honeycomb into your jar, and so it hasn't been cut with a hot knife, it hasn't been spun into fine little filaments in a centrifugal, it hasn't sat in stainless steel tubs. And so, the floral essences seem to stay, and it does. Beekeepers remark again and again, wow, this is just like chewing straight into fresh honeycomb. So that's something. Yeah. But that was we didn't understand that could happen. Yeah.
So you're an inventor and entrepreneur, and I trust that there are other inventors and entrepreneurs out in the audience. Does anyone have a question for Stuart? Well, yes.
It's not a question on one
Yeah, I can understand you not wanting to ask that question. Yeah, it's been copied by factories in China, and they were very quick. In fact, they looked at our patents and our movies before the product was even out, and one particular factory just started promoting it, and they were using all of our, very annoying, using all of our images, our story and all of that to do it. And that was a very poor copy, it wouldn't have worked. But since then, of course, they've got our originals and have made quite good copies. And it's one of those, what do you do? To defend your patent is incredibly expensive. We do have them. But in China, we hear so many stories of them. Well, you shut down one factory and two more spring up. So you have to do Anyway, we're sort of dealing with that by not dealing with it at the moment. There's another paradox,
No shortage.
Yeah.
Another question?
Do you have a question?
I was going to say, will it replace the traditional particle?
Yeah, will it replace was the question. Most people taking it up, as I said, the new beekeepers, and we suspect that in terms of the commercial area, it'll be new people wanting to set up new commercial rigs that will be using it, because the already existing ones have put from $200,000 or $300,000 to a couple of $1 million into their infrastructure, their honey processing sheds, and so that's a big thing to go and change. And also because there's a real inbuilt conservatism in the beekeeping. It's a farming industry, and just think of conservative old farmers who did it the way their dad did. So it won't change in a hurry over the in the commercial sector, I don't think. But boy, it's just, I still get a surprise when I this honey here I just took out, was it yesterday or the day before? No, I just walk up to the hive, put the lever in. It's so different from a weekend of getting completely sticky, getting stung, annoying Michelle because I've stickied up the kitchen, all of that sort of thing. So I think it will become more or less the standard thing for home beekeepers, and then commercial we've yet to see.
So what do they do? Like, what kind of reaction do they give when you
Yeah, so
say I'm stealing it?
well, the bees have capped that honeycomb. When the honey is so-called ripe, that is, it's the right moisture content, they put a cap over it, and that means it'll keep all winter or it'll keep for a long, long time. And so when the mechanism moves, actually that capping pretty much stays intact. Sometimes it fissures a little bit, but the bees, watching the bees crawl over the surface, they don't seem to change their behaviour at all. After a while, now all the worker bees are female, so after a while, Martha will say to Bertha, I'm sure I filled that yesterday. No, you couldn't have filled that yesterday. It's empty. So like they figure it out. Within a few hours, and within a day or so they've torn all the capping off and are repairing the cells and start refilling it again. Luckily for us, we didn't know whether that would work in the...
Brandon?
So we read a lot about the problems with declining bee populations around the world. Just how serious is it?
Yeah, it is very serious in that there's still arguments. So this is the declining bee populations, if you heard Brandon, in that we still don't know exactly why they are declining, but there seems to be environmental factors, less diversity of crops, and so when you don't have a diversity of food coming in, their pollen, their protein, then you're not as healthy. Insecticides, pesticides, modern crops are made for a very tight flowering time, so bees don't get a chance to build their numbers up in a slower way and then make use of it. There's a lot of different factors, and it is serious, I think, because it points to, well, if the bees are suffering, what else is, in terms of our pollinators, but in terms of the insect world in general, and that, so for me, they're both, a canary in the mine. They're indicating, well, there's really something quite worrying going on, but they're more than the canary because we do depend on them for pollination of about a third of our food crops. So farmers in the US, apiarists in the US are losing 50-60% of their hives in a season. Now for them, it's awful. It's horrible to come to a beehive and find it's dead and the bee's gone. But you can divide a beehive 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a season. So they can build the numbers up quickly enough, but that's not addressing the problem. There is a problem there. These bees are dying off for some reason, and that's an environmental, probably a social problem we all face. And that's why I think more and more people are becoming aware of the complexity of the web of life we live in and our interdependence, and that is so important.
Thank you. Well, please put your hands together for Stuart.
You get a jar of honey later? Or?
I think we'll wrap it off.